What's being done to support the mental health of lawyers? Are alternative routes to the profession as accessible as they're intended to be? And can you have a successful career within the law whilst also being a successful parent? I'm Duane Cormell, Managing Director of Round Recruit, an award-winning specialist legal recruitment consultancy based outside of Manchester. And in each episode, these are the sorts of questions I'll be trying to grapple with. I'll be inviting prominent lawyers to discuss and debate the key issues facing the legal profession today with unflinching honesty. Welcome to Refreshingly Honest Chats with Lawyers. Welcome back to another episode of Refreshingly Honest Chats with Lawyers. In this episode, I'll be exploring what's an increasingly key issue within the legal profession, diversity. I think diversity comes in all shapes and sizes, and joining me today to discuss that, I've got Matthew Flanagan-Roberts. So Matt, as I know him, is an associate within the corporate practice team at Squire Patton Boggs, based out of their Manchester office. Matt advises on national, international transactions, and he specialises in mergers and acquisitions and private equity investments, whilst also doing joint ventures, corporate reorganisations, corporate governance, and employee ownership trusts. Matt advises, amongst others, private equity investors, corporates and entrepreneurs, as well as individuals across a range of sectors, both locally, nationally, and in international markets. Matt's also the immediate past chair of the Manchester Young Solicitors Group, which is how I got to know him. That's a social and professional network for qualified solicitors under 10 years PQE, of which he was chair for almost 3 years. And in addition to that, he currently sits on Manchester Law Society's EDI committee, as well as Squire Patton Boggs' EDI committee too. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hi, Duane. Yeah, I'm very well. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And I think something our listeners wouldn't know is this is third time lucky for us.
Yeah. Few IT issues, few IT issues before, but if doing things remotely, there wasn't an IT issue, it would be something to question, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. But we're here, and so far so good.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for joining. I'm really grateful. And actually, before we get into the nitty gritty of our discussion today, I just wanted to commend you for your skills on the violin. Because I don't know whether you realise this or not, but a wedding that you played at over summer, I was a guest there, and I thought, hang on a minute, I recognise that guy with the violin.
Thank you. Okay, it's something I've sort of I've kept up from a young age. I started at the age of 4, and it's something I've sort of always been into. My music, and I was classically trained. Subsequently, sort of doing the Irish traditional music alongside the classical training as well, which is great just to have the exposure to both. Especially at the age of 11, when you're playing Mozart concertos, isn't exactly the most exciting. And it's been brilliant in terms of the places that it's brought me, sort of around the world to play music. But it's something that I just love keeping up alongside the law. So.
Well, if anybody's looking for an exceptional violinist for their wedding or whatever the occasion, I can wholeheartedly recommend Matt's services.
Thank you.
When we were arranging for you to come on today, in fact, arranging for you to come on a few weeks ago, but the technical issues, I heard that you had actually listened to the podcast before, which is wonderful to hear. So I just wanted to say thank you for being one of our listeners. But to get on with kind of what we're here to discuss today, I think it would be really good if you could start us off with a whistle-stop tour of your career so far, just to give any of our listeners that don't already know of you some context.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you. So studied sort of my undergraduate degree, law with French at Queen's in Belfast, which entailed sort of a bit of study time abroad in Toulouse. When I graduated in 2013, feels like a lifetime ago now. That's the year I moved to Manchester to do my legal practice course. So I sort of knew a handful of people in Manchester, main person being my eldest sister, which sort of brought me across the water. And towards the end of the year, I then secured a corporate paralegal job with Turner Parkinson. And then within a few months of the paralegal role, I was offered my training contract for the following September. Did a 1.5-year training contract with Turner Parkinson. Managed to get the 6-month timed account rather than having to do the full 2 years. So mainly did it in corporate, but did sort of, the necessary seats in real estate and my litigious seat in litigation. Following that, I actually went to KPMG Legal for 4 months. sort of an opportunity that came about towards the end of my training contract that I thought, right, what else is out there? And just due to the nature of the work, it sort of wasn't particularly for me. And thankfully, Turner Parkinson took me back. Well, sort of, I always something I always say is, whenever you move on and leave a firm, always leave on good terms, or in the best terms that you can, because you never know where you'll end up back at. So I was back there for a while, and was part of the sort of Knights takeover then of Turner Parkinson. I was with Knights for a period of time before moving to Squires, and I've been with Squires now for 2.5 years. And currently getting ready for a secondment to our Sydney office. So which is happening in about a month's time. So not long to go.
I'd seen that pop up on LinkedIn, and I'm not going to lie, my initial response was just green envy. Please tell me more. How long are you going for?
Yeah, so we're going over for a year. So I'm joining the corporate team out in our Sydney office out there. Very much looking forward to it. So sort of something that's been in discussion for a number of months with the firm, and making sure it's sort of right for us and right for the firm. And I think the team out there, sort of do quite a lot of similar transactional work that we do. A mixture of private M&A and private equity, as well as public company work as well. So it'll be great to get over there and get stuck in. They seem like a fantastic team out there from the few conversations I've had with some of the partners on teams, and I've now been introduced to the wider team via email. So yeah, very excited to get out and experience sort of life over there for the year. It's great as well. The firm have been able to make it happen. One of the reasons being that my husband is planning on doing a career change into interior design, and there are a few opportunities out there for him to do that. So the fact that the firm sort of not just supporting me, but also supporting my other half in that too is fantastic. So yeah.
Well, as I say, I'm very jealous, but I'm equally excited for you, I assure you.
Yeah, I said to the team that I'd try. We have a sort of bi-weekly full team meeting, and I said I'll try and join maybe once a month. And I may be by the Sydney Harbour Bridge or on a beach, on a, or on a beach. So well, I don't
Not rubbing
know.
it in.
Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to the opportunity that's sort of there, and it'll be yeah, exciting to get stuck in.
Well, I'd love to hear more about it when you get back, so you can kind of reflect on it. That's if you're not one of these people that I think an awful lot of people that do things like this fall into the category of being the person that never comes home. But we'll cross that bridge in a year's time. Diversity is what we're here to talk about, and I think it's a really broad, multifaceted topic. So, how would you define diversity?
Um, to me, it's something actually we've been discussing internally at Squares. I think for me, I think for a number of years prior to now, and probably still an element of it now, I feel that diversity is maybe seen as different, whereas what we're working towards, it should be the norm. So it's getting to a point where the reason, especially sort of taking my experience of being involved in the DEI initiatives at Squires, we very much have 6 pillars of focus within the firm, that's led by our DEI team that we as fee earners can, get involved in. And it's very much getting to a stage where, the various initiatives and conversations that are being, the initiatives being held, sorry, and the conversations that are being had, that it's getting to a stage where they don't need to be had anymore.
That's
And
good.
that's very much what we're driving for. So I think for me, it's always been, growing up, and because I was, into music or maybe into a lot more creative things than playing football, I was maybe seen, by some of my colleagues, and I'm very open and honest about, my experience in school, especially at the beginning of school, very much bullied for playing music, and because I was seen as different. And it's very much getting to that stage of, right, well, no, these things are normal, and the people have different interests, and people have different backgrounds, and people look different, and people have different interests. So I think it's that sort of focus for me. I think in terms of defining diversity, it's nearly right. Well, what's the definition? What it was, what it is now, and what we're looking to get towards.
I like that. And that's good to hear because the next question I suspect, there might not be such a positive answer to, if you're making progress at Squires, but the legal profession as a whole, how do you feel about diversity in that context?
Being completely honest, like it has massively changed since I've started out in the legal profession. Now,
Okay.
that wasn't that long ago, since 2014 when I first started at Turner Parkinson. Now, I think when I first started, diversity just wasn't spoken about. It wasn't, the events around diversity weren't, from what I could see, being put on. There wasn't a focus on it by firms. Whereas I feel like over the years, there's just been this massive shift. And I feel it's because so many people are coming through the firm, starting out in firms, or coming through the firms, or maybe at the top end of their profession, are now starting to speak out and feel comfortable to speak out because there's more. They can see more people in the firm that are willing to use their voices for the right reasons. And I think one thing which I've obviously loved and really, really sort of um, cherished is it's not just those that identify with the DEI communities that are speaking out. It's also the allies, and that's a massive thing that we're really focusing on at Squires is the allyship piece, and doing ally training, and that we have an internal allies guide around. It's not just those in the firm that myself who identifies with the LGBT community using my voice for the right reasons, which I'm always willing to do, but it's also my colleagues using their voices to support that as well. And I've been in the workplace where this, when I was first starting out, where there's comments made and different sort of derogatory terms were used against the LGBT community. Now at that point, I wasn't by any means out and proud to the extent I am now. So, and for me, especially at the beginning of my legal career, I was like, just keep your mouth closed, head down. You want to get your training contract, you want to qualify. And in my head, I was thinking, don't do anything that's going to sort of destroy those opportunities. Whereas to think now of our trainees that are coming through in Squires, I'm so proud of each and every one of them that use their voice, whether they identify with certain DI communities or are allies to their trainee cohort, is absolutely fantastic. So just to see that shift in what 7 8 years is fantastic. And I think firms have realized that whether it's graduates and their trainees and paralegals coming through or lateral hires, all those individuals are now looking for firms that are putting DEI at the forefront of their agenda, because it's so important now to so many individuals. Whether it's it might not be to that person, but it could be to that person's child, it could be to that person's niece, nephew. There's so many links that feed in, and it's something that I see a lot of firms having at the top of their agenda now. There are firms that still naturally have a lot of work to do, and unfortunately, there are still horror stories that you hear amongst firms. Both international, mid-tier, high street firms around Manchester that just need that bit of a kick, in my view, into the 21st century. But it's all about that education piece, because in my view there's so many resources out there now that if your firm doesn't have a policy on X, Y, or Z, there's resources out there to be shared. And it's something that we at Squires are very sort of proud that we are willing to share our resources, especially around DEI. We're not holding them close to our chest. It's not, we see it as it's our intellectual property. We have produced these policies, we have produced these resources, you're not having it. It's something that I feel like, firms just becoming a bit of a, you know, it's nearly increasing that communication piece between firms, that it's okay to share resources and experiences on that. And then more so, I would say, for the high street firms that potentially don't have either the people resource or the financial resource, that there are things out there for them to use.
And if any law firm professes to truly care about this subject, then that's absolutely the right thing to do, right? Because what you said at the beginning, I'll be honest, I've never really thought about it in this sense, but defining diversity in terms of it actually becoming the normal. And if you feel passionately that way, then yeah, surely you'd want to share whatever resources you can far and wide to further that aim as fast as possible.
Completely. And I think my view, and I very much do call out those who are at the top of their game, are the managing partners, are the office leaders, are the owners of law firms, that if they're not doing enough in this sector, they should be, because they'll lose good people. And, you know, we're very much, as we all know, in the in the legal sector, especially you, Duane, we're very much in an employee market. Firms are crying out for lawyers across the board at all levels and all sector areas. So, if firms aren't ticking the right boxes for employees, there's tons of other options out there.
My next question was going to be around the fact that, sadly, in this series of podcasts, I have conversations and quite often end up coming to the conclusion with my guest that the legal profession lags behind a lot of other professions in terms of its development. But credit where credit's due, you've said a lot's changed in the time that you've been in it, which isn't a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things. So what I'd like to, I suppose, ask instead is the sorts of remarks that you sadly had to endure as a trainee,
Mm.
and you took the view that I'm going to keep my head down and just crack on with things. Do you think in the world we live in now and the state the legal profession's in today, that if such remarks were made by senior lawyers, that trainees would feel more empowered now to stand up to that and sort of stick their head above the parapet?
Um, I would say yes and no. I think yes from the experience of I've seen it firsthand at Squires, and I feel like our trainee cohort feel they have the platform to speak up and the platform to speak to the relevant individuals, because within the office we have, although our initiatives and sort of policies are led by the overall DEI team, we have internal office champions who are fee earners that sort of champion those various pillars of DEI. So there, you're very much go to if there's an issue, which I think's again a fantastic thing to have. And they're very, those individuals are very much identifiable around the office as to who they are. But I also know, and of first-hand experience, there's people who have reached out to me on LinkedIn who are paralegals and trainees at other firms across the city of Manchester that have experienced and been subject to comments and behaviour that they shouldn't be subject to. Now, it's very much in those firms, although with Manchester, as big as the city it is, the legal scene, as we know, is very small, and a lot of people know each other, and
Mm.
you know, people amongst firms aren't afraid to speak to their friends or people they meet at network events about their experiences if they feel that they're in a safe environment. So it's very much a case that there are a lot of firms, unfortunately, still out there that have a lot to do in the sector, and there are trainees that I've spoken to on LinkedIn who have asked for advice to say, which I feel, again, extremely overwhelmed in the sense that people feel they can actually reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's very much sometimes doing that I use LinkedIn for that platform to say, and I think maybe around last year, I did a post about, if anyone is experiencing, certain behaviors or certain comments at the firm, my LinkedIn messaging is always open for advice. And to have that, because I feel like it's something that I would have really taken advantage of when I was at that point subject to those comments. So it's been nice to have those individuals reach out and give a bit of advice too, because they feel like they haven't got it internally. But again, it's sad in the respect of they should have that internally.
Yeah, that's perhaps not the answer I was hoping you would give, actually, after the promising um, retort that actually things have improved a lot since you started out. I was hoping that, yeah, that
I think
you
it's
wouldn't then be
definitely
telling me
not
that.
as it's probably there because as I say, sometimes the bad outweighs the good, but it's more a case that there's definitely been a lot of change. I would say there's a lot less people that maybe reach out to me on LinkedIn that would have done maybe say 7 8 years ago had it been the position I'm in now.
So I suppose the fact in itself that they at least feel empowered to do that is a positive step. It's a move in the right direction, right? Albeit, it's not an ideal scenario.
Absolutely. And it's been great as well with the, I sort of sit on the Manchester Law Society and DEI committee as well. And it's great from a perspective of, it's sort of myself as a representative from Squires plus representatives from tons of other, firms and businesses across the city. And just again, to have that platform to share experiences amongst what different firms are doing, and to see some of the junior members of that committee say, oh, I went and spoke to our managing partner about X, Y, and Z today. And it's brilliant to hear that feedback, and that they feel like they can go and they want to make a serious change within the firm they work, because the end of the day, they're the value of the firm and the value of the firm coming through. So if that managing partner is willing to listen to that person and make that change, how many other people in the firm that's actually going to positively impact is fantastic.
You've touched on in your answers already the fact that you sit on those committees. Could you talk a bit more about them and maybe pick out a couple of things that you're involved in that listeners to this podcast would, I suppose, like hearing about, and see that there's progress being made? Because I'm always keen to point out that in prior episodes, sadly, we've sometimes landed on conclusions that the legal profession is lagging behind on certain fronts. So it's nice where it's making progress, I think, to shine a light on it.
Yeah, no, completely. So we'll touch on sort of the Manchester Law Society piece first and then go on to Squire. So from the Manchester Law Society angle, it has various sort of subcommittees that sit under the main Manchester Law Society Council, one of which is the DEI committee, which is headed by Stephen Appleton, who's a partner at Bradner's. So if anyone sort of following sort of what I say now, if you are interested in joining, feel free to reach out to myself, Stephen, or Fran Ecclesbeck of Manchester Law Society. Now, since joining it, it's been fantastic to see that committee grow from strength to strength. And the one thing I do is, as sort of mentioned before, I love about it is it's various, paralegals, trainees, and qualified lawyers across various different firms and businesses coming together to really bring a bit of a force of what it is in the, or what it should be like in the legal community of Manchester. And I think the one piece that we've found really beneficial is that getting around a table once a month, having a conversation about what each respective firms are doing, but then what we as a committee want to do as a committee. So I know with the Manchester Law Society, we've run various events throughout the past number of years. Even during lockdown, we had a few virtual panel events where we had a panel come on, people just joined it through Teams. There's a few bits and pieces they're planning between now and Christmas in terms of in-person events. And each month, a member of the DI committee writes an article for the Messenger Law magazine. It's sort of a different feature. We sort of pick various topics to make sure we cover the full spectrum of DEI. So it's fantastic in that respect. And I also think, what's great about it is the intersectionality between the various elements of DEI in that committee, because it's not in Squires. I sit on the LGBT plus committee. But with the Manchester Law Society, it's that intersectionality piece that you can see that really comes into play. And also having people to sit in the committee that identify with more than one area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what
And
you
to
mean.
see sort of, how they're impacted compared to someone that maybe just has one identifiable characteristic, if that makes sense. So it's a great, I sort of nearly call it like when we sort of outside of work with Manchester family. It's a really safe place that you can share experiences. If you want to have a moan about something someone said to you, you can have a moan. And there's near that support network. And I know this year that the Manchester Law Society did their usually they have it's like an annual Pride brunch at the Midland Hotel. So that went ahead this year, which is great. I was sort of walking as part of the Pride parade with Squire, so sort of waving from afar to them all looking on at the parade. But it seemed like a fantastic event. So
I saw a
just
photo on LinkedIn and your wonderful outfit that I would commend you on to.
oh yeah, indeed. So I was trying to think of something as colourful as possible, as I'm sure you can see from that shirt. The amount of people actually that asked me where that shirt was from. I think it was from Zara, to be fair. But it seemed to stand out in photos anyway. So yeah, it was great to be involved in that. And then from the Squire side internally, what I loved about the onboarding process at Squires was, in your first sort of meeting upon joining, because I joined 3 weeks before the initial lockdown, so end of February 2020. I had an initial meeting with HR, just sort of chatting through a few policies, procedures, getting your laptop, all the rest. And as part of that, there actually was a slide deck on DEI and the various pillars the firm has in the firm. So you could express interest in that meeting if you are interested at that time in joining the committee. Now, obviously, you can join it or leave it if you want to at any stage, whilst at the firm. So I sort of expressed interest in joining the LGBT plus committee, and Carlton Daniel, who's our LGBT partner champion in our commercial team in London, reached out to me that week on the phone and said, I know you've expressed interest. I want to introduce myself. I head up the LGBT plus committee from a partner perspective. This is what we're about. do you still want to get involved? I was absolutely yes. And just to have that, as in it was done, I don't think the firm realised how subtly it's done, but how effective it is.
Mm,
And that to me spoke volumes because it felt like I didn't have to go into the office on day one and say, I'm gay, I'm part of the LGBT
yeah,
committee or part of the community, was fantastic. And I felt like I could beat myself from day dot. So again, internally, we've ran sort of various events, both virtually and in person with the LGBT plus committee at Squires. And one of the, things I really enjoy being involved in it is the various podcasts we've been involved. So speaking of podcasts, we managed to do a podcast sort of about, the LGBT plus community in the legal profession with some of our colleagues on a global basis. So we had colleagues from the West Coast of America, East Coast of America, myself and a few other colleagues in the UK. And
that's brilliant.
again, just to have that conversation and different perspectives across different jurisdictions was mind blowing, and it's something that, again, sharing that resource, even though we're part of the same firm, sharing it on a global basis has been a fantastic thing to be a part of.
It sounds like the firm's approach on this front is very well thought through,
Yeah.
very deliberate. And I think that's can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, because we now, as of sort of within the last year, they've established what's called the Office of DEI internally at the firm. So it's very much headed up by one of our senior partners over in the States, but on the UK side, led by Wendy Ramshaw, who's sort of based out of our Leeds office, but sort of around the various UK offices, month on month. And to have sort of Wendy there driving the force is fantastic because she has nearly your own personal interest at heart, even though sometimes she probably doesn't realise it. You can tell she does. And I think it's one of them. Again, don't think she realises how much confidence that she's given to so many people across the firm. Actually, might stop a minute. I feel like I'm getting a bit emotional. But I think it's fantastic to have that community there that you feel are really supporting that element of diversity. That part of you that you should be able to bring to the workplace on a daily basis is brilliant. So
Thank you for sharing all that. Like I said, I think it's really nice where there's good stuff going on to shine a light on it and share those experiences. I'd like to ask you about the so-called gay wage gap. So I've spoken to guests about gender inequality in prior episodes, and in preparing for this episode, I came across this term gay wage gap, so called, whereby on average gay men earn 11% less than heterosexual men, while allegedly lesbian women earn 9% more than heterosexual women. Um, I don't know whether that's right, whether I wrote that down right, whether it's wrong other way around, but either way, the suggestion is that there's something not altogether positive going on here. Does that surprise you?
uh, from my own perspective, it does. As in, I know that myself and my colleagues at whether previous firms or current firm, we're very transparent amongst our sort of levels of PQ about what we earn, and it's something that I appreciate. Although maybe you know probably more so in previous firm that at top level they may not want you to discuss salary amongst your peers.
Mm,
But it's something that we all most of us who maybe enjoy an after work drink on a Friday and potentially get into a conversation about pay, and you have those conversations, which I think is great. And I think now that you've sort of mentioned that, I think it's probably even more important. And I do know that I've always had those conversations with my female counterparts, especially from the gender pay gap, because I think it's something that those conversations should be had and can be had amongst your female counterparts, because it's something that really attracted me to Squires is being part of the corporate sector and part of the corporate finance industry, which is predominantly a male dominated industry, as we all know. But one thing that really spoke out to me about Squires was there are more female, or more fee earners that identify as female than male
Okay.
in our team, and to me that spoke volumes.
I mean, it's surprising when you say it because you're right. It is typically a male-heavy practice area, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, you both my previous firm and current firm, we do speak about sort of levels of pay. And I think at Squires, it's very much I think sort of the process of reviews and pay reviews and all the rest is done on a very fair basis, sort of my experience. But from what you said there about the gay pay sort of pay gap, as it were, it doesn't surprise me. And sometimes I think that some of the heterosexual counterparts may be seen as more profitable to the business, more influential in the business. And that could come down simply to, I'm just trying to think from a, logical perspective, could come down to a confidence issue or a lack of policy and procedure issue in that business, where that individual who identifies as gay or lesbian doesn't feel as confident in what they're doing. And that does massively stem into your quality of work, your productivity, how you feel valued in the workplace. Because I do know that at my previous firm, and I know one of the partners said to me not too long before I left, he pulled me aside one day and said, "Your head doesn't really seem in it. Are you planning on leaving?" And I said at the time, I was like, no, I think at the time my offer was still being negotiated with Squire. So I was like, no, 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 absolutely not. Obviously, I couldn't disclose it yet. But at the time, I just felt that there was just a massive lack of support and policy and procedure and a push for diversity, that I sort of felt, right, I've really given my all here over the past couple of years. I feel like I'm not getting it back. So naturally, I just felt a bit disengaged and sort of uninterested in my development with that particular firm, which is amazing now to see the flip side of it, where I'm in a firm that I feel I get back exactly what I put in. And, I very much, because the firm support me and develop me as a lawyer and as an individual so much, I just want to plummet that all back into the firm and its development and its progress and where it's going in the future. So I do feel like there's that percentage of people who are paid less. I do feel a lot of it could be down to those particular issues in the workplace.
So it's not necessarily the gap exists owing to direct discrimination, but actually it could be indirect insofar as there's not the right culture, support, policies, procedures, as you've said, and so people are not able to flourish as they otherwise could, and therefore don't progress at the rate they otherwise would, and therefore lag behind. Am I understanding that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it could even be down to, if that person's maybe lacking confidence in the workplace, but their heterosexual counterpart has the most confidence to ask any question. And it could be those heterosexual counterparts think, right, I can ask for an extra few grand here, my annual pay review, sorry.
Never considered
Whereas,
that. Never
yeah,
considered that before.
yeah, that's sort of my just mainly because I haven't experienced it myself, but that's probably my take on it. There probably is an element of direct discrimination to an extent in certain professions. Um, but I feel hopefully over the next couple of years, same with the gender pay gap, that we continue to see that decrease.
We also run a piece of research here at Realm annually, and in our most recent piece of research, we asked lawyers, amongst other things, about diversity. And this year's results revealed what I deem quite a startling statistic. So, when we asked the question, do you believe all people have an equal opportunities to succeed in your firm? 40% of lawyers either outright said no or they were unsure. Does that surprise you?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I think the figure, when you put it sort of there, it does, because it's such a high figure. But just from purely speaking to people in the Manchester market, I'm not surprised. And it even comes down to, again, speaking from a previous experience, where there was a golf day being organised, again, previous firm. and every single heterosexual male in the team was asked if they wanted to join the golf day. Me and all the females in the team weren't. And I asked the question straight away, why, one, am I not being invited? And two, are our female colleagues not being invited? And the answer was, oh, we didn't think you'd be interested. Well, why?
Mm.
And to me, again, it's those sort of, especially in corporate, it's that business development piece, both BD internally in terms of doing your work well and, re-winning work from the same clients, getting repeat work, but also getting your name out and about in the business development market to get yourself known amongst, potential clients, intermediary contacts, your accountants, your corporate financiers of the world. That not being exposed to that on those BD days will likely impact your career progression. And it's those things that I don't think people realize that, by leaving certain individuals off, to some people it might seem like, oh, it's just a golf day.
It's not though, is it? It's more than that. It's an awful lot more than that. Putting the morality and ethics of all this to one side if we can, our research also found that 43% of respondents said that the diversity of a senior management team would have a high influence in their decision to move to a firm, and a further 41% said it would have some influence. So you interestingly compare that with some similar data we've got looking at the charity sector, where only 11.5% said it would have any sort of real influence. The conclusion I draw then is that actually there's a clear commercial business case, not just a moral and ethical one, for firms to increase diversity at the top, right?
Completely. And to say, because at the end, when you're coming through your early years on your legal profession, you want to be able to identify with those at the top, whether it's in terms of characteristic or interests or, just general sort of camaraderie, and in terms of how you get on with each other. And to have people who are at the top, so say, for example, some of our partners who identify with the LGBT plus community, I very much look up to, as well as those, the partners in our team who very much, a particular few especially, who are very much allies of the LGBT plus community. And again, I very much look up to them in that sense. So you can see, completely from a business case why firms need to be doing more of it. And, at the end of the day, it is a sort of profitable measure for any business, in particular law firms. And I think particularly in the law, especially in corporate, when you're working sometimes the longer hours, you want to feel that you're being, obviously, one, valued, but two, supported in all elements of your life. And if there's a strain of that, say, for example, the sort of DEI element of you that isn't being supported, there's other firms that will. And that's when firms that, are at the, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? They can easily lose good people.
And I think from some of your answers to other questions, you'd probably be a prime example of this in the sense that you didn't feel that you were properly supported elsewhere, and now have joined somewhere where you do, and it shines through in your commitment, your results, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's one of them that, in terms of, the transactional work we do, the business development work we do, everything they do for the DEI committee and sort of externally outside the firm, I don't feel like I'm being overworked, because some people may say my contractual hours are 9 to 5. If it's not happening within then, I'm not going to do it. Whereas for me, I sort of say, right, I've got my main part of the day to do my fee earning. If it means coming in an hour or two earlier in the morning to do my work for the LGBT plus committee internally, or the MLS and DEI committee, I'll get in and do that. But because I really enjoy doing it, both for the Manchester Law Society, because how much they've done for me and for the firm, again, it's just me wanting to put value back into those organisations.
One final question, if I may. I'm very conscious that your time is valuable. For those listening, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you could give someone if they felt as though they were struggling right now because of any of the points we've touched upon today?
I would say there's always going to be one person there to have your back, and I think although you may not think it at the time, and you may think, there's this element of me in the workplace that I can't speak out. Say, for example, there's elements of DEI characteristics that are just naturally evident. There's
Mm,
elements of DEI, like being part of the LGBT plus community, that aren't naturally out there without someone telling you.
yeah,
So it's a case of, there always will be someone in the workplace that will have your back. It's finding that person. And that's where it sort of comes down to the element of firms being responsible for having identifiable people within the firm that those individuals can go to as a contact base, or as a, shoulder to lean on. If someone said something that someone more senior in the firm, they can go to get advice from on that particular matter. So I'd say, yeah, it's one of them that I feel, especially more juniors in their careers are coming through, that think maybe similar to me. Right, you're in here to sort of prove yourself. You want to get your training contract. You want to qualify. Get your head down. There always will be that one person that will be there to help you through.
thank you. That's great to know. I want to thank you for your time today.
No,
Again,
thank you very
I'm
much for having me.
delighted that third time lucky we got it to work. It's been really nice hearing some of the positive things you've had to say around the way the profession has moved on, actually an awful lot in a relatively short space of time. A little bit saddening hearing that there's still work to do, albeit I'm not entirely surprised by that. And I just hope that after an amazing year in Australia that you join me again and maybe we can talk about secondments and life as a
Definitely.
lawyer in different jurisdictions.
I'll be delighted to. No, thanks very much for having me, Duane. And, it's sort of message out there to anyone listening that, again, my LinkedIn messaging always remains open. And if you feel you want to have a sort of discreet word or get a bit of advice, if it's advice I can give, I'm more than happy to.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks, Duane.
As always, I really enjoyed that conversation. Matt was a brilliant guest. I think things that have stuck with me from speaking to him would include the idea that being part of a community can be a really powerful thing insofar as the furtherment of your legal career. That sort of feeling empowered and having allies. I think there was really something in that. I was initially quite surprised actually at how unsurprised Matt was at our 40% statistic. So we asked lawyers that did our annual survey here at Realm, do you believe all people have equal opportunity to succeed in your firm? 40% of them either outright said no or that they were unsure. And that's a lot of people. So the fact that he wasn't surprised by that, I guess initially I was taken aback. But then hearing and factoring in some of the other answers that he gave, referencing derogatory comments made aloud by lawyers, direct discrimination, not inviting particular people to certain events, well, actually, I can fully understand why he wasn't all that surprised. But it was really pleasing, like really pleasing to hear him say, I think on multiple occasions, that it feels that even since he started out in the profession less than 10 years ago, that it's changed a lot and changed a lot for the better. And as I said in our conversation, I think it's important that we shine a light on progress and applaud the profession when it's doing well. But the best thing I got from Matt speaking to him was that, and it's the first thing actually he said pretty much, was that in defining diversity, he looks actually at it more in terms of the aspiration around making it just what's normal. And I think I'll try and wrap up on that poignant point. So you're welcome to connect with Matt on LinkedIn. absolutely take him up on his offer of support if you need it. I'll make sure I share his details in the summary that I'll post with this episode. The full written transcript of the episode will be published on our supporter website, www.realmrecruit.com, where you'll also be able to sign up to receive lots of other insights to help you develop your legal career, which as always leaves me to just thank you for joining me today for Refreshingly Honest Chats with Lawyers. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share, and please join me next time.